Hello everyone. So today I'm going to try something a bit different, and all of my other videos are scripted, so I'm just pretty much reading from a script I'd written beforehand. But for this video I'm going to try speaking more sort of ad-lib style, see how that works out. It probably won't be as articulate as usual, and I'll probably have to edit quite a bit out, but let's see how it goes. So there probably won't be as much practical advice in this video as well, but over the years I've tried to learn quite a few languages. Well, sort of dabbled, I should say. I haven't really been serious about all of them, but I thought I'd just talk about a little bit about my experience learning other languages and ultimately why I failed as well, because yeah, I failed most of them. There is one I've actually been getting into for the past few months, and I'm going to talk about that one in this video as well. So I've actually always had this desire to learn a foreign language ever since I was a little kid. So the only language I've actually, if you've watched the other videos on this channel, you probably know that I've been learning Japanese pretty seriously for the last few years. But before I tried to learn Japanese, I actually tried to learn Russian. So that was pretty much the first language I ever tried to learn on my own, I think. And that was probably about 10 years ago. It was a time when I got into a few Russian novels and I thought it was really great. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to learn Russian, right? So the way I started was I started memorizing the letters, the Cyrillic alphabet. I got about halfway through then gave up. Yep. So that was my first rather pathetic attempt at learning a language, right? I got halfway through the alphabet and then quit. But the main reason I failed, I think, is because, well, first of all, I had no idea how to learn a language. I had no idea where to start, what to do, and I didn't really have much motivation in the first place. It's not really somewhere I ever really planned to live. I didn't know any Russian people, so yeah, that failed pretty miserably. So then the next language I tried to learn is Mandarin Chinese, and this is after I'd already started learning Japanese. So this was probably around early 2017, I think. And this started mainly because I had a sort of fascination with Chinese culture. I mean, I didn't really know much about China itself, but it just seemed like an exotic place, right? And kanji, that's another one. It's pretty fascinating, right? I also considered going there to study abroad because it's quite easier from Australia to go to China to study. It's close. There's some pretty good study abroad programs. And another reason was on the Anki Shared website, I actually found a really cool deck for Chinese which had thousands of sentences, but it had audio recordings from a native speaker of Mandarin Chinese. So basically, I just used that. I didn't really do any immersion. I just used that Anki deck and just kept going through the sentences. And I did that for about 50 hours, I believe. And I did get to the point where I could understand many common Chinese words and, understanding bits and pieces here and there. But I didn't ever really get beyond that point, right? To the point of understanding sentences, being able to have conversations, that sort of thing. I never reached that level. Yeah, and ultimately I stopped because at that time I was more focused on Japanese, right? Getting better at Japanese. And I thought I needed to focus on one language for the time being. Yep, so that was that. Okay, so the next one is Italian. And I first sort of dabbled in Italian around October 2017, and then again in October 22. So this is a language I've pretty much always been fascinated with. I'm really interested in the language itself. I like the sound, I like how it sounds. I like Italian cinema, and I'm very interested in the culture. So that's actually still a language I really would like to learn eventually. I'm just not at the moment. And another reason that motivated me to try learning it was I found this really old book, which was learning Italian via the natural method. So it's pretty much like a graded reader sort of comprehensible input that allows you to start right from pretty much knowing no Italian. And then it sort of introduces more words and keeps getting harder and harder until you can pretty much read Italian fluently by the end of the book. So I sort of wanted to test that out as well and try learning that way. So I did that. However, both times I didn't get very far. This is mainly because I couldn't dedicate enough time to it, as I was also trying to focus on Japanese. So this is a reoccurring theme, right? I've got my main language that I'm trying to learn, and then it's really hard to try and learn another language on top of that, especially like me, if you're doing not only languages, but you have other hobbies, other things you want to do as well. It's really hard to sort of balance two languages. So that was one reason I failed. Another one was the book I was using. The difficulty goes up too quickly. So I would have to reread the same chapter multiple times just to keep up. this became boring really quickly, so I ended up giving that up. The second time was simply there wasn't enough, I couldn't find enough sort of lower level comprehensible input for Italian on the internet, which was another problem I'm having for many languages. Okay, so the next one I'm going to talk about is French. So I actually had to study French in high school, and I hated it. My grades were awful, and it was a complete disaster. Each week, I literally didn't pay attention at all. I hated it so much, right? And in French class, we had to do a vocabulary test every week. So every week, we had to memorize 10 new French words, and then we'd have a test at the end of the week, right? But the thing is, after you did the test, you could mark yourself, and then the teacher would ask everyone in the class, so what did you get out of 10? So you could pretty much report your own results, right? So I used to get like 0 or maybe 1 at most some weeks, right? But I used to just say, 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10, right? So that way I managed to pass. But I tried to learn French again around December 2017. I don't even know why, to be honest. It just seemed like, it's like if you're an English speaker, it's like the go-to language is French, right? That's what most people seem to learn when they want to get into foreign languages is French. And not to mention, it's very similar. At least the written texts are extremely similar to English. Like a lot of the spelling is literally the same. So it makes it quite easy for English speakers to learn to read French. So that's another reason. And if you've seen my other videos, there's one video I made about a year ago, which is an experiment I did learning French. So this was the one I did back in December 2017, where I just got a sentence deck from Anki. I just wanted to see if I just did sentences, if I just memorized the meanings of sentences and did that for hundreds, for thousands of cards, how far could I get with that? And so I did that for about a month, and I probably did about 60 hours in the end, at the end of the month. And surprisingly, by the end of the month, I could pretty much read French, with a dictionary that is. My vocabulary was still pretty lacking, so I couldn't, pick up just any book and just read for pleasure. But if it was a really, really simple text, or it was a normal text, but I had access to a dictionary so I could look up all the unknown words, I actually got to the point where I could read, which was pretty good, I thought. Yeah, but then after that, I just gave up. I was like, okay, yep, well, I've done this experiment for a month, so yeah. I never really had a massive interest in the language in the first place, so that was one of the main reasons I failed in the end as well. Okay, and then the next one is Latin. So that's a bit of a strange one, isn't it? Latin. It's not a very common language that people are trying to learn for fun in their free time. But I did, and I tried to learn it around early 2021. So two main reasons for this. The first one was that around this time, I started getting into Roman history a bit. So I was quite fascinated with that for a few months, especially after reading SPQR. That was a really fascinating book. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to learn Latin, right? I want to learn more about the Romans, so I'm going to try learning Latin. And the second reason was that I thought it would be pretty cool to learn, I found this book called Lingua Latina, I think it's called. And it's pretty much like the Italian book I was talking about before. It's pretty much just learning Latin through comprehensible input. So I was really interested in learning that way. And I thought it would be really cool to be able to read texts from 2,000 years ago, right? In the original language. You'd feel sort of like a time traveler or something like that, right? But with Latin too, I didn't get very far because, at first I was quite serious about learning it. I was like, it's just reading, right? I don't have to learn to listen to it. All I have to do is just learn to read it, right? And then I just have access to all these texts I can read. But the thing is, when I want to learn a language, right, one of my main motivations is ultimately to be able to interact with native speakers of that language, right? With Latin, who am I going to talk to? Ghosts? There's no one to talk to, right? There's pretty much no one, at least that I'm aware of, who speaks Latin as their native language these days, right? Sure, you can you can read or whatever, you can study the classics, but besides that, you can't really use it in a social setting. So for me, that's it. I don't know, it just seems a bit lonely, learning a language whose speakers have all been dead for a long time. It's a bit depressing to think that, Yeah, so I sort of gave up. I gave that up pretty quickly. And then not too long after, then I tried learning a bit of Cantonese. So this was also, I think this was around March 2021. And Cantonese is another language I've actually been pretty interested in for a long time. There's two main reasons again. One of the reason is the sound of the language. I actually think Cantonese is like one of the coolest sounding languages I've heard. I can't really explain why. I just hear it and it's like, oh, yeah, that sounds cool. And another reason is that, around that time too, I was quite into Hong Kong films. So especially the films of Wong Kar-wai. And that really motivated me to try and learn some Cantonese. With Cantonese too though, yeah, I didn't get too far, right? I just ended up downloading a sentence deck from Anki with some audio. I tried doing that just a few minutes a day, but in the end I was like, yeah, I'm not going to get anywhere just doing this a few minutes a day, right? So I gave that up. And not to mention I was still focused on Japanese again, right? So that's kind of a reoccurring theme. And yeah, but then next is Spanish. I tried to learn Spanish in late 2021, maybe around September, I think. And the reason why, so I didn't really have an interest in the Spanish language, and to be honest, I still don't really. But I found the channel Dreaming Spanish, and I just thought, wow, this is amazing, right? You can literally learn a language with comprehensible input just by sitting down and watching a bunch of YouTube videos, right? So I thought, wow, this is brilliant. So I tried doing that. And, it met my expectations. It was brilliant, right? And I ended up going through, I think, the whole super beginner playlist. I went through that. And I actually got to a point where I started identifying a lot of common Spanish words. So yeah, that was really good. But, right, again, I just didn't really have that much of an interest in Spanish. So if they had that sort of content for something like Italian, I probably would have kept going with a slow but somewhat consistent pace. Yeah, but ultimately Spanish, if you don't have an interest in the language itself, then it's not going to work, right? You're not going to keep going with it. So eventually I gave that up. And then the next one, right? Yep, there's more. The next one is Korean. And Korean, I tried to learn this briefly in 2022. And there are a few reasons. So one reason is that it's quite similar to Japanese. So I thought, it'd be pretty easy to learn if you have that sort of base. Well, not easy, right? But it sort of cuts down the amount of time you need to learn it because it's sort of similar to Japanese in many aspects. And I thought another reason it would be quite easy to learn is because of the availability of really high quality content. So I mean, Korean films and TV series, the last 10 or 20 years in particular, have been of really high quality, right? So I thought because you have such an abundance of high quality content, it would just make it so much easier to be able to consume all this input to learn the language, right? And yeah, not only that, but also I really like Korean food. I think the food is really nice. I mean, that's not really, for me, a good reason to learn the language, but it's a plus, right? And also, I also found like a Korean comprehensible input channel. So I started using that, but the thing is, there were some beginner videos, but then there wasn't enough content to bridge the gap between the beginner videos and like the intermediate. So I got a bit lost with that. And I also sort of decided that I never wanted to live in Korea. I would love to travel there still, but I thought, I really only want to learn the language if I actually intend to live there someday. Whereas with Korean, I didn't really. Mostly because it's just too cold, right? And I don't like cold places. I don't want to live somewhere cold. So I scrapped that eventually. Well, not eventually, pretty quickly actually. And finally, that brings me to the final language. The final language. Okay, what is it? I'll tell you. It's Thai. So I tried to learn Thai. First I tried to learn in 2022. And then I tried again in early 2023. And now I've actually been trying to learn Thai this year since April, and I'm still going now. I'm just doing a little bit each day though. And so the main reason was that I actually lived in Thailand from 2022 to 2023. So I lived there for a year on a working holiday visa, and I had a wonderful time, right? I made some Thai friends. I became very interested in Thai culture, and I would really love to live there again. But another reason is that, like Dreaming Spanish for Spanish, there's actually an abundance of comprehensible input available for Thai learners. So you can pretty much learn the Thai language, again, like Spanish, pretty much just by sitting down and watching these YouTube videos. Yeah, so when I saw that, I thought, wow, brilliant, I'm going to learn Thai this way then. And I tried to in 2022. And I did that for a month or two maybe, but eventually, I was in Thailand, I was in the country, right? And I was going outside, I was doing new things, exploring, traveling. Eventually I started working too. And not only that, but I was still trying to improve my Japanese at that point, right? So I found it hard to put aside time every day to focus on my Thai. Yeah, so eventually I sort of gave up on that a bit, but I thought I still really wanted to learn it, right? So I tried again briefly in early 2023. That didn't work out because I ended up leaving Thailand as well, and then I sort of lost motivation. But this year, right? So I've been living in Japan. After I left Thailand, then after that I went to Japan, and I'm in Japan now on a working holiday visa. And so obviously I've had more opportunities to improve my Japanese, especially speaking here. And because I was sort of at a level where I feel like I've gotten good enough in Japanese, not great, right? But to a level where I'm sort of semi-satisfied. And I thought, you know what? Maybe it's time to try learning Thai again. So I've been doing that since April this year. I haven't been doing it intensively at all. I've been doing about 1 hour a day. So I realize, just doing a language for 1 hour a day, right? It takes a long time to actually get anywhere. But, because I'm trying to balance that with other things. So I'm going to just try to keep doing that for a while. And then eventually, once I become better, once I'm understanding a lot more, then I'm going to try and sort of up my immersion and get more and more and more. But yeah, this is the furthest I've gotten compared to any other languages I've tried to study outside of Japanese. Yeah, and I found the more I do it, the more I'm sort of becoming intuitively able to understand more words and simple phrases. I'm still not at the point where I can reasonably understand native speech, not anywhere near that point. But like I said, I'm going to keep going and see how that goes. Yeah. So if you've listened to the video this far, to all my rambling, well, thank you. And yeah, let me know what you think. So look forward to the next video. All right, see you later.